Welcome to PolyCast, a civilization podcast focused on game strategy.
CanusAlbinus,
Makahlua,
TheMeInTeam,
MegaBearsFan.
and we're ready to go whenever you are ready. 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to PolyCast 429. I am Makahlua. With me as usual, CanusAlbinus.
Don't ever clean your bathroom and respackle the walls. It's a mess.
TheMeInTeam.
I mean, why clean anything ever?
I'm MegaBearsFan.
Hard to get away with not cleaning things when you got a toddler running around.
Very true.
These past couple weeks, I've been getting to clean crayon off the floors and walls.
Oh no.
No.
Oh, yeah. We're
I
at
mean,
that stage.
technically, as Lance tells me sometimes, you don't have to do anything.
Thankfully,
Yes, but-
we have found that
But yeah, sometimes the consequences are a little bit questionable if you don't.
thankfully we have found that magic erasers are quite effective at this job. Although we had to buy a massive pack of like 100 of them because they fall apart and degrade very quickly. It's also great for cleaning the grout between your tiles.
I have found them to
recently
be very
discovered
useful.
You can get rid of permanent marker on dry erase boards by using dry erase marker. I did not realize that was true.
Oh yeah, you just go over like what you'd previously written again, and then it comes right off. Yeah, it's because it has something to do with like the oils in the marker is what makes them come off so quickly. So when the oil dries up, it doesn't erase, but then you just write over it again, and now that oil's there again, and it mixes with the ink and comes right off.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
You guys are teaching me witchcraft.
I mean, that is a useful life hack if you use dry erase boards, and pretty much useless knowledge otherwise.
Oh yeah,
I don't use them that frequently, but I've had occasions, so...
Oh yeah, it's very useful if you work in an office building and people write things on the dry erase markers or on the dry erase boards and then, don't erase it because they think they're going to need to reference it over and over and over again for weeks, even though no one will ever look at it.
Oh no, I'm talking about someone put permanent, like regular marker onto the dry erase board.
Permanent marker. Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, and going over that with a dry erase marker made it come off.
It still works. Now you have to do it
Oh.
like, I mean, it doesn't perfectly erase it. You have to like do it a couple times, but yeah, the interaction from the dry erase marker messes with what's on there. With the permanent marker, you can actually clear it that way.
Well, okay, that is witchcraft then.
Yeah. Because I had that happen.
State.
I'm like, how do people deal with this? And I'm like, wait, what? You just go over with the normal dry erase marker? Okay, I'll try it. And yeah, sure enough, I'm like, oh, okay.
He's a witch. Can we burn him?
Yep, straight to the pyre with Phil.
It's not happening. My witchcraft is a little stronger than those people who get themselves put on the stand. Unless, of course, I'm Jester.
Made a
And
mistake.
your point is getting killed.
You made a mistake. I'm not Sane. Okay, maybe we're getting a little bit off the rails here.
A little bit.
All right, well, let's try to get as back on rails as we can. In lieu of any really major new civilization news, we're going to, I guess, continue talking about the other 4X historic grand strategy games that have been announced and are going to be coming out soon. And first one we'll talk about today is going to be Humankind, which is getting a major new update or has already gotten a major new update. I'm not sure if this is already available yet. This was posted like a couple weeks ago.
I believe it is,
but it doesn't,
yes.
Yeah, it doesn't give a date for the update, so I don't know if it's actually available yet. It's been quite a while now since I've played Humankind. But anyway, this is called the George Sand update. Who is George Sand? That name does not ring a bell.
I do not know. It might be...
I'm assuming that must be like a historic person. Like, I doubt they're going to name it after like somebody who works at the company.
George Sand is a French novelist.
Yeah, I just...
Another
I just
sci-fi
searched
author.
it. It's an interesting choice for a patch name.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, what does this patch actually do? Well, for one thing, it says it's going to do a complete culture rebalancing It says many cultures from the base game and the expansion and the DLCs are being tweaked, which sounds like a good thing because I know that there was a lot of imbalance between the different cultures in that game, and a lot of people, there were like best cultures to pick for each era if you got the first pick. And the AIs in particular would like almost always pick them in the same order. I don't know, like it almost felt like they were hard coded to go after specific cultures if they had the choice to do so. But I don't know how it works inside the game, so I don't know exactly how that logic works. But hopefully the AIs will actually pick a wider variety of cultures with the first few picks, so that if I'm picking third or fourth or whatever, maybe I still have a shot at getting the culture that I want in any particular playthrough. So, but we'll see.
It says non-exclusive cultures option.
Right, which I was about to get to next. And if you don't want to have to hope that the AIs don't pick your culture out from underneath you, they're also adding a new mode where at the beginning of the game you can set it up so that multiple players can have the same culture during a single era. I would probably never play that mode myself, but I would be curious to see if turning that on does cause all of the AIs to just pick the same culture every era, because that's how it would have worked before the rebalancing. I don't know if that's how it's going to work after.
So in multiplayer, this is going to be the same version of what happened with Civ, where, so what color Inca are you?
Right, or what color Gran Colombia?
I'm the pink one.
Yeah, it might. I don't know. Again, we'll see. It'll depend on what they did with the rebalancing. I think they have like patch notes later, which might say what the specific rebalancing changes are. But I'm going to assume that our audience isn't as familiar with Humankind as they are with Civ, so it probably doesn't make sense for us to go through all of that because most of our audience probably won't know what we're talking about. I don't think any of you would know what we're talking about because I think I'm the only one here who has actually played Humankind.
I have never played Humankind. I have bought it though.
Yeah, I mean,
I think I've played some of the demo builds, so I sort of know.
And what else do we got here? Rebalanced AI personas, over a dozen new personas for you to play against. That's cool too, because like when the game first came out, I think there was only like 12 of them, and if you were playing on like a large map with the maximum number of civilizations, like you would use all of them in one map. So that's good to see. Buffed Transcendence. So again, for those who aren't familiar with Humankind, the way that game works is every era you get to pick a new culture. So basically you change civilizations throughout the course of the game. And you also have the option to stay with your current civilization or your current culture at the start of a new era, and that gives you some additional bonuses for having done so, though I know that was still a very unpopular thing for players to do, so apparently they've buffed that. They don't specify exactly what the buff is, but it just says it's a permanent bonus based on your affinity. So, yeah, probably some permanent bonus based on the ability that your previous culture had. So that could be cool. More reason, more incentive to do that. Again, if your preferred culture has already been chosen by another player or AI, you can just stick with what you have, and you'll get rewarded a little more for it.
We have the official Endless mod that's being updated, available on Steam Workshop and Mod.io, and then just the list of bug fixes.
Yeah, and then a big thing as well is new dev tools for modders. So if there's anyone out there who is a Humankind modder, good news, you're getting a lot of new helpful tools to make modding hopefully easier.
And all you gotta do is go to the launch options in the Humankind preferences and type -- allow mod tools. And it will allow you to open the dev mode of the game by pressing Shift F1 and pin any of the windows by clicking P on the top right. Please note that multiplayer will be unavailable during DevTools mode.
Yeah, I wonder why. That's nice.
Yeah, go figure. Although, I mean, I guess that you could make an argument that if you're developing a mod that is intended for multiplayer play, like maybe you should have access to the dev tools. I don't know, maybe.
I think it should. I agree.
Yeah, I think you'd want to like gate that somehow, but private or.
Yeah, obviously you don't want people just going into it'd be the equivalent of, playing Civ 4 in multiplayer and one player just goes into the world builder and starts popping wonders in their capital.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, you could like flag a game that is set up that way or something so that people don't go into it unless they're looking for that kind of stuff rather than playing a game.
There could definitely be a way to set up like a private game where you've, check a checkbox somewhere that says allow dev tools, and then the game knows that you're in developer mode testing a
Now,
mod.
the reason they might not have provided that is it might take extra work to make that functional multiplayer, rather than trying to prevent cheating. They're just like, well, we would need to do a significant extra stuff with the program to get it to run this developer mode while people are connected to the game, and like have it show other people what's happening and whatnot. So maybe they just didn't think it was worth the effort to.
That's the most likely reason.
Yeah.
Or at least didn't have the budget to make that kind of change.
Well,
I mean, it's the same thing ultimately. Like, if you could do everything, you would do everything, but like resources are finite, so you don't.
Chances are what's happening is that the map is supposed to be static between the versions. Like, a lot of times in Civ games and EU4 games and stuff like that, desyncing happens when something happens to the map. So
yeah, somebody takes over a city and then on the turn roll over, the game's like, Grr.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So changing the map with dev tools probably would be one of those things that would be like, yeah, we could do this, but it would be very difficult to make it occur in a way that would not be like, this is just janky and broken.
Yeah,
I'm sure
forcing resyncs and crap.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there are very valid technical reasons for why that would not be available in multiplayer, beyond just, the fact of we don't want people cheating. So plenty of good reasons to not make that available. But
cheaters can cheat anyway, unfortunately.
Yeah, but even so, like, there's definitely a case for why someone would want it to be a multiplayer.
Yeah, well, yeah. If you're doing a multiplayer mod and you need to test stuff, yeah. But
or if you're just like hanging out with friends and like everyone's on board with what you're doing, like, I mean, yeah, like that stuff is. There's nothing wrong with any of that.
We've played a number of EU4 games where we've wished that you could use the console to fix a bug.
Or even like an example in like a Civilization game could be something like you've got, 4 or 5 people playing a multiplayer game. 4 of them rolled really good starts, but then you've got that one person who just has a crappy start location. It's like, oh, it'd be really nice to be able to just go into a world builder and like give them a couple extra resources to make the game a little more fair and competitive,
But crappy start locations are fun. I guess not in competitive.
Oh crap!
Even in casual
on the North
play.
Pole.
I played out of a position like that in Civ 6.
Shout out to Turncast, our
sometimes it's
companion.
Sometimes it's fun to play with constraints. I don't know.
Sure, it can be, but again, that would be another use case where you maybe would want access to a mod tool in multiplayer.
Yeah, there's sometimes you sit down for a game of Civ and you want a little bit of an off-the-wall challenge. Then there's also times you're sitting down to play, just a relaxing weekend multiplayer, and then put you on the South Pole, and you're like, "This is not what I wanted." Thanks, game.
Or heck, maybe to Phil's point, maybe that is what you want to do. Maybe you want to make the map harder.
That's
what I'm saying. Sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. It's just that Civ has this knack of sometimes doing that when you don't want it to do that.
Yeah. Nobody gets iron in this game. We're deleting it all off the map.
I mean, people always criticize me when I make the world super arid or cold and then set the resources to sparse, but that's the real way to play. It's more fun.
I can deal with sparse resources easier than I can deal with the North Pole and South Pole.
Yeah, but see, when you make the world sufficiently cold, almost everything is the North or South Pole.
Speaking of sufficiently cold, anybody play the Canada game Robot Revolution yet?
No, I've been in the thick of the Dungeon Crawl tournament for 2 weeks now. It's almost over, though.
I played it once. I died on turn 5.
Dear.
Yikes.
Oh, is it that hard?
Well, I didn't do it right, but yeah. You gotta know what you're doing.
If you don't get, there's gotta be some way to prevent yourself from just getting shanked by a GDR instantly.
Hope they go the other direction.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe just restarting until it doesn't happen is one solution. It might be the only solution, but yeah, that would definitely work.
It's like
roll an island start where you...
It's like we've got Firaxis partnering with FromSoft to develop Civilization scenarios.
God. No, I do not see wide swaths of poison swamps in this scenario, so it's probably not with FromSoft.
There has to be a poison. Got to have a poison swamp. Or 2.
Yeah.
Elden Ring has multiple.
Yeah.
Well, those aren't really poison swamps, because there's like the poison swamp and then there's the rot swamp. And they're very different things.
There's a lot of swamp.
Yeah. Well, there's one like way deep underground that you gotta that's not super easy to find as well. I'm like, oh my god, another poison swamp.
Yeah, that one was pretty rough.
Oh yeah, that one's one of the more brutal ones that are in any of their games. But this is not a FromSoft podcast, so
Sometimes I wish it was, but no.
hey, I mean, if we want to start, I can talk
we're
about
not just
FromSoft games all day.
PolyCast, we're everything. We're PolyCast because we're everything cast.
Yeah, there you go. The poly takes on a new meaning.
Well, it hasn't had a meeting since season 3.
It means whatever we want it to mean.
How many polyamorous groups are really upset that we have the name Polycast? Probably a lot.
Probably none.
Well, I'm talking
How many-
cumulatively over 15 years.
I mean, our top competition, like when I searched the number of years back, was like some company that makes pipes.
Well, yes, there are a lot of Polycast industrial applications.
Yeah, but I mean, like those were the other people who wanted the name generally.
I want to say there might have also been a company that made dentures, or it was a brand of dentures or something.
Oh yeah, but I mean that again, that's going to be materials basically.
We have gone way off topic.
Yeah.
So far off topic.
So let's talk about the other new game that's coming out soon from Paradox. It's called Millennia, and they've been doing dev diaries for a while, and they did a demo video of gameplay just recently, which is really nice. And it's gameplay from the 60-turn demo that will be available for everyone to play during the Steam Next Fest starting February 5th, which is 2 days. It's just 2 days after the recording of this episode, which means this news will be old by the time you see it. But who cares?
Does this game have a planned release date yet? Because if they already have a public playable demo, it feels like they must be pretty far along, and this game should be ready for release probably pretty soon.
Well, I don't know if we have a release date yet. I do know that if you've looked at any of the artwork, it does look pretty rough.
Yeah,
They just say
I'll
coming in
definitely
2024.
I'll definitely be talking about that later when we talk about their little gameplay demo video.
But
Or
we're
is that what
talking about that now.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
because the
no,
demo
their-
is just
their
the
battle-
statement.
Yeah, their battle screen is I'll go with the word cute, I guess. I don't know if any of you were able to watch it, but yeah, they've got a little animated battle screen that pops up where you get to watch the units, and it's like watching an old school Final Fantasy battle.
Yeah.
They stand in a line, and then they run across the screen to the soldiers on the other side, hit them with sticks a couple times, then run back to their line.
Yeah, that's like straight up FF7 style.
Yeah. Although I don't think it didn't look like the player has any control over what's happening.
No.
Which is
We're
unfortunate.
not
You know what
issuing
we need?
orders.
We need a Civ style game that uses a similar combat scripting mechanic as the minions.
No.
Obviously less complex, because you cannot put the complexity of Dominions into a Civ game. It's out of scope. But if you had like some basic scripting, like people attempting to flank or guarding artillery or whatever, that could be interesting. Because like it would resolve that. You wouldn't have to micromanage the fights. You would still get outcomes based on what you script.
You know what else would resolve that? Using the system we have now.
Well,
Well,
I'm talking
I
about
mean-
a different game here. That's why it would be interesting to implement that in a Civ-like game, where you'd have to be a bit more military emphasized than Civ is, and a bit less empire building emphasized, because like that would be a significant part of the design space. Then
It would be breaking the covert action rule.
Well, so it
One
looks like what they're
great
going
game.
for. Oh, go.
One great game is better than 2 good games.
I don't know if it would be breaking that.
Well, you'd have to focus so much on how to do battle scripting that the rest of the game would be very disconnected from that.
Oh, I just searched around in the video to see that. Yeah, that's probably they're probably meant to have a more complex animation on the actual release. But yeah, right now it's just thunk thunk.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering if the intent eventually is for the players to actually have like commands that you issue during battles, right? Again, like more like a Final Fantasy
Even
battle,
more, yeah.
where it's a turn-based thing, and you pick which unit you want to attack and which defending or which opponent unit you want them to attack.
It would slow the game down so much to do that, though.
I was going to say.
but I mean, keep in mind. So the way that this is working apparently is that the game has semi-stacking, right? So you don't move necessarily individual units around the map. You move armies around the map, and the apparent number of units that you can put in an army is either, I think in this demo I saw like 3, but I'm assuming that probably increases as the game goes on and you get into later eras. And Humankind does a similar thing as well. And it's intended to alleviate the micro of having to move so many units around the map, which is a very annoying, tedious thing to do in both Civ 5 and Civ 6. And it also, makes things like army composition important and stuff like that. So you actually group units into an army, right? And then that army has strengths and weaknesses based on its composition. So, more similar to what you would get with stacks in Civ 4. And it means that you don't have to issue orders necessarily to every single unit. You just run your 2 stacks into each other. And then in the case of Humankind, they kind of deploy and then you do your tactical battle on the map just as you would in Civilization 5 or 6, but it's only between the units that are in the opposing armies. This looks like it's more just all automated with a little, again, Final Fantasy animation going on. But it's hard for me to believe that the player is not going to have any input into how that battle actually resolves.
Yeah, because even in the Humankind version, you are directing those units like a little mini battle. Whereas in this one, they just automatically attacked. It's like, okay.
Yeah, and if you've
ever
Paradox
played... isn't the best with the tactical combat control. The closest thing they have is Hearts of Iron, but man,
you've had much to say about Hearts of Iron over the years. So
yeah,
Paradox always goes for bigger picture kind of things and tries to not make the player have to deal with a whole lot of the little things very much. So that could be a case of this is just the direction that their design is going.
The good news is you don't even have to watch the battle because it's just just happens like it does in Civ, which is the way I would prefer it.
Yeah, and that's how when you implement just showing a fight like this, even games way back in the day, before 2000 did this, and it was cool to watch a couple times, and then okay, this unit attacks this unit, good, all right, next this unit attacks this unit. I only cared about the damage because you're not controlling anything about the outcome besides issuing the order to attack.
If there's no player, if there's no player inputs at all, no commands that you can issue, I imagine this is something where maybe your first time playing the game, you'll go ahead and you'll sit and watch them all, especially if you have new units that you've never seen before. You just want to see what they look like and what they do. But after a few games, you're probably just skipping these if you have the option to do so.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I did in Dark Wizard on the Sega CD more than 20 years ago, and it's exactly what I would do with this kind of system too.
I mean, does anybody remember Call to Power?
Yeah.
They had similar stuff.
From a design perspective, you run into kind of a chicken and egg problem, for the designers, right? Because if this is something that you figure most players are probably just going to skip past in most of their games that they play, then how much effort do you actually put into making it look and act really nice? But then because of the fact that it doesn't look nice and doesn't have any player input, nobody actually watches it, right? So you've got a circular problem going on now.
I think the whole gameplay looks kind of ugly. But...
Well, presumably it's early work in progress, so I think we can safely assume that things will look better when the game actually releases. But the important thing is, how does it play?
Are we being graphic snobs now? Yeah, I was about to say.
I was just saying, I don't think, even the gameplay just looks bland.
Oh, yeah. Well, again, hopefully that's, because it's still in a fairly rough state. Again, I haven't
They're saying they intend to release it this year, apparently. Sometime.
Yeah, it has a
that's December. That's not that much time to I don't know.
They've at least gotten to the point where they know they need outside input.
Yeah, if they're letting the public play it, I feel like they feel like they're pretty far along. Generally, you don't let the general public for free play your alpha state game. Usually that's late beta at least. Unless you actually release it in early access, which I don't think they're doing.
Usually, when you have a beta like that, it's a feature complete game that just needs to have bugs fixed.
Yeah, and might still have some placeholder art here and there.
Very unlikely for that to be true unless they're changing something very quickly. Usually, by the time you get to beta, you've got almost everything put together. You're just looking for bugs. If you're releasing an alpha or a gameplay demo, like a demo especially, is not likely to have a lot of placeholder art unless they're trying to test the game idea as opposed to the mechanics themselves.
Well, and of course, the demo isn't the entire game. It's only, I think they said the first 60 turns, which
Right.
they said is the first 3 ages. I'm not sure exactly what an age is in this game. So
Basically,
like, if
you
this was-
research 3 texts and then you research the next age. And the first one who gets there gets to pick which age it is.
Okay, but then are we talking about the game ending in like what? Like classical era, medieval era, or the demo?
They
like
said
how
there's 10
far-
ages.
Okay, so the demo is a little less than a third of the game,
Right.
hypothetically.
What's
So
the
it could also
screenshot?
be. It could also
Age
be
of
that-
Rocketry, 1405 AD. There's that. There's
Yeah.
some classic Civ stuff right there.
So it could also just be that, like, if they aren't as far along as I'm wondering if they maybe are, then it could just be that the early game is a lot further along than the late game, which is why they're not letting us play anything from the mid to late game.
That's possible. Like the game company that my brother runs, they've released a Kickstarter demo, and it's feature complete for the first level, and all the art is there as well. But after that, there's nothing further. So they're just working on the next stuff now that they've got the demo out. So
Right. And that's very common for playable demos, is you pick like either the first level or a very early level, right? You polish that up, get everything working, and then you pack that in a demo, and then, the rest of the game is who knows what the state of the rest of the game is.
what else did we see in this gameplay video? There's sort of a commodities system, sort of like we saw in Ara last time. But it doesn't seem to be quite as granular, and there doesn't seem to be like specific crafting going on. More like a production chain. Like you have certain buildings that take in certain resources and put out certain resources. It wasn't very clear because they didn't get far enough into game for a lot of that to show up. But it looks like that could be interesting, although a lot of those buildings seem like they might take up space in the city. And like all the city center buildings, like the buildings you build in your capital, they're all Total War style building chains that you build, and then every subsequent technology that is involved, you go up to the next level of that building, and you have to build it basically into the next building. So a lot of things that come up are not really choices you make; they're just, oh, click here for the next timer. It feels very Paradox to me because like making new cities is on a mana system almost. It basically, you have to develop certain amount of government mana to make the next city. Each city has its own mana meter to make it so that it can make improvements or satellite towns. It feels very, very, very mana-like.
It's
If
basically
you've ever
the
played-
idea of having the logistics and government in place to support more than one city. It's just been abstracted into, as you said, a mana type concept.
And
Humankind kind of had a similar thing too, because you had prestige, which was a currency that you accumulate in the game, and that is used for founding new towns and upgrading towns into cities. So it looks like this might be a similar kind of approach to what Humankind did.
I don't know, it feels very EU4 style mana to me.
Whereas, of course, in Civilization, pretty much the only limit to expansion is production. How fast can you pop out settlers?
Well, production and upkeep. The upkeep in Civ 6 being amenities.
Well, I meant the ability to expand. Like whether or not you can reasonably maintain that expansion, sure, but like you can build as many cities as you can produce settlers in Civ. Now, whether or not, you can keep all those cities happy and upkept and stuff like that and protected from barbarians, but in these games, in Humankind and apparently in Millennia, there's more of like a hard limit to, there's a cooldown basically between founding new cities.
I hate to say the word mobile game, but it feels more mobile than Civ 6 does. Which is ironic because Civ 6 is actually on mobile platforms.
Yeah, and again, this game has the art looks more like Civ 5, so there will probably be people who complained about Civ 6 looking too cartoony who will go to this game uh, because the graphics look a little bit more like Civ 5's graphics, and then end up with something that maybe plays a little bit more like a mobile game, even though they complained about Civ 6 looking like a mobile game.
Well, people like that can go over to that game and be happy there.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think Civ 6's graphics looked great. I loved the art style for that game.
I like Civ 6 and Civ 5, but they are different, and their art styles are different, so there's no point in comparing them, really.
I think they look. My complaint with them was never, though. Honestly.
I wish you could see hills more clearly in Civ 6. That's my biggest
that's
complaint.
a fair criticism.
Yeah.
That
that's
is my biggest
valid.
complaint. I don't care about the colors. I don't care about the art. I don't care how cartoony the characters look or the buildings look. I just want to be able to see what I'm looking at.
Where art meets UI, yeah.
I think the UI for Civ 6 is beautiful, and I think the UI for Civ 5 is beautiful. I wish it was a little more functional, but that's
Yeah.
Firaxis. This Millennia does have the ability to automatically build a queue by just right-clicking or shift right-clicking on the next thing you want to build while something's building.
Oh,
That's
and
nice. We haven't had that since Civ 4.
Can you click and drag things within the queue to reorganize it? Because, oh my god, that would be so nice.
I don't
Oh,
know.
yes.
They never added more than one thing to the queue.
Ah, god, yeah, that's one of the most frustrating things in Civ 5 and Civ 6 is the way that they made their friggin' build queues work. Like, oh my gosh, in Civ 4, you could just click and drag. Why can't we do that anymore? It's so simple.
You could also
Because-
hold the button and in Civ 4 and add to the end or start of queue, etc. In
And
addition,
also to the end or start of the queue in every city.
yeah, absolutely.
Although I think
Or a
Civ
selection of
didn't-
cities.
I think Civ 6 might have added that. In
Civ
a late
6 added
patch,
the ability to do something like that.
where you could add something to the queue of every city.
I don't know if it was
Yeah, there's
that.
a Civ 6 has a one where you can add. I forget what the name of it is, but there is a function where it lets you add that to the queue of every city. Like if you wanted to add a spearman on every city, it would add a spearman to every.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was something that
Finally
was
put
patched
that
into
in.
the game. Yeah, I think after the last expansion came out, or with the last expansion, or maybe it was part of or maybe it was something that was added in with the New Frontiers stuff.
I don't know.
Yeah, it was very late
yeah.
on. 'Cause I don't remember having that option.
It was definitely not in the base game.
Would still like to be able to do more clicking and dragging though.
Hotkeys only. Let's go.
Oh no!
Play the whole game in
things-
command prompt.
Other things that showed up in the demo or in the video, apparently, they finished the Bronze Age, or they finished the Stone Age and went into the Bronze Age. And the next age after the Bronze Age was apparently a choice between 3 different things based on what the players did and which player made it to the next age first. So at one point we saw the UK, which, why is it the UK? Why is it not just England and Scotland or whatever, and Wales and the individual countries? But why does America exist at 4,000 BC? Who cares? But they were getting a Age of Heroes, which had something to do with landmarks, which not sure what that is. And then Rome was going for the Age of Iron, and they overtook Britain later. And then there was another option that was Age of Blood, which apparently had some sort of bad effect. It was a crisis age, and it would be triggered by the first nation that killed 6 units from another non-barbarian nation, and they wouldn't be able to have a choice in choosing another era because they killed 6 units. They were forced into a crisis age. So
Now, these ages are only apply to that particular civilization, or the whole world goes into that age?
the whole world goes into the next age, but dependent on the first civ to reach their next age. So in this game that was shown on the video, Sweden was the player because obviously it's Paradox, and Sweden was a few turns behind getting to the next era, which was going to be the Age of Iron. And Britain was in charge at first. They were going for Age of Heroes, and then Rome showed up and said, no, Age of Iron. And they did it faster, so when the first nation to reach the third era was Rome, who had picked Age of Iron, the whole world went into Age of Iron. So if you are the first to reach the next era, you choose what the era is.
Crisis
That's
every
gonna
time.
that's gonna be
Let's go.
kind of a weird thing for large continents maps where presumably like someone on another continent gets to an age first, and even though you have no contact with them or have no idea that they exist, they still somehow influence the age that you go into on your continent.
Yeah,
Get out tech, nerd.
that seems like a problem that needs to be addressed. When you settle cities in Millennia, they start out as vassals, and you have to use your government mana to annex them as cities that you control. And as you increase the number of ages you've gone through, different types of mana become available. Like, you start out with a government domain, and you get a warfare domain pretty early, and then the next ones are engineering and diplomatic. And they get, well, you've got culture as well, and that's its own type of mana. So it's basically, it feels a lot like a hurry up and wait for your counter to be full. But there's actually stuff to do with your units in the game, so it's not as bad as a game like Imperator Rome, where nothing you did could be done without using mana somehow. It's a shame that game got stopped in development, but it was kind of ruined from the start by mana.
Do we want to talk about the national spirits stuff, or is that?
Yeah, that's the next topic.
Oh, okay.
Because I haven't talked about that.
Oh, yeah, because this is interesting. Instead of it being, because they want to say that they have the idea that the player authorship is a big thing in their design. They basically want you to write yours. So instead of coming in with a fixed sieve, like if their example is Spain, we expect if we take Spain, we're going to have like the haciendas, and you're going to be very religious focused. But no, it's not what they just want you to have the flavor of Spain. They think if you pick Spain, you're picking Spain because you want to see the Spanish city names. You want their mythos and stuff like that. Like same thing if you picked Babylon. You want to be that ancient powerhouse type of thing with their mythology and their type of buildings and things like that. Which is interesting that it's basically mostly cosmetic.
Yeah,
it's going to be
pick a color.
Pick a color, yeah. Which is probably why they have things more like the UK as opposed to, which I still think, why would you do England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland? Not UK. That's a very, well, it's like with having America exist in 4000 BC. It's very modern.
I mean, again, it that makes sense again in Humankind, right? Because the different cultures you pick are based on the era that you're in. So you would pick the UK or Britain, but that would be an industrial age culture, right? It wouldn't be an ancient age culture. There is a medieval England culture, right? And then there's a industrial, like British or UK culture. And then later in the game, I think there's a Canada and an Australia as well. So yeah, that sort of thing makes sense in Humankind, not so much with Millennia.
Yeah, and there is more spirit choices as you go forward in ages. Like there's an example screen here that shows when you get to age 2. So you've already picked Spain. If you were doing classical Spain, I guess it would make sense to take something like you wanted to go into exploration and do seafaring or something. But they've also got things like down in engineering, there's a God King dynasty, which is basically Egypt. If you had picked Egypt, you wanted to keep on the Egypt theme, so to speak.
Yeah, so basically what it looks like is each era you pick new abilities.
Not every era, every other era.
Oh, every other era. Okay.
Yeah,
2, 4, it's like 6, H2. Yeah.
And I know there will be quite a few Civilization players who will be happy with that because I've seen proposals for that on many forum threads. So there's a lot of Civ players who will gravitate towards that kind of design. Personally, I prefer if you're going to name your civilizations or your cultures after like historic nation states, then they should be themed after those historic nation states. But that's a personal preference, not a
I actually like this as a design concept better, coming from EU4, where if you pick Spain or Portugal, for example, I'll use Portugal because they're a good example of this. You can pick Portugal and EU4, and they have national ideas that are strongly related to colonization and naval combat ability. But there's nothing in the game that requires Portugal to take that route. Like you can, for example, just go on a conquest spree through Europe and the Maghreb and beyond, and your national ideas are still going to be naval based. Or like, what if you get kicked off somewhere and you're now a landlocked nation, and you're taking your third idea group, and you're unlocking your late game or like mid to late game national ideas, and it's still naval stuff. You don't even have a boat, but you're still getting like naval themed crap. Like, yeah, okay, that's the route Portugal went historically, but there's nothing to say that they have to in the game. In fact, the game is designed very much around you not necessarily following the course of history. And if a nation doesn't follow its historical course, it's a little odd to expect it to have bonuses associated with a course in history that it didn't take in this world. And I say the same thing about Rome, the Ottomans, whatever. Like, it would make sense if these nations are getting bonuses based on what they're doing, rather than just their names. So I do think there's something to be said for this national spirit design.
Oh, for sure. I'm just saying that me personally, if they were going to take an approach like this, I would rather just name my civilization myself and pick my own color and my own, flag or logo or whatever, and make my own civilization instead of, picking ones that are named after real ones, because that comes with certain, biases and expectations. If I pick Egypt, for example, am I going to feel some subconscious pressure to pick things that fit thematically with Egypt, Whereas that's not a problem if I just make up, the MegaBearsFan Republic,
You want to have a custom faction design like we can in things like Stellaris, where you can just make your own thing and your own flag.
Well, maybe, it would be nice if you don't have to play a historical theme at all, and you could just make a random meme nations and then pick an amalgamation of horribleness. I like doing that with the custom nation designer in EU4. I'd put Inuit stuff with otherwise European architecture and all kinds of horrific.
I would be
absolutely
very
non-historical.
I would be very
my intention was to make it look as bad as I could get it. So I was just messing around. I tried different combinations of things that just look stupid.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if Millennia does not at some point end up with just a custom, nation builder where you pick your own name and color and different flags.
Yeah, that'll probably happen. They've added that to most of the games I've played of theirs, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know if it'll be in on release, but at some point I figure it will be there.
It might be, because also with your spirits, each time you pick one, you get a little mini tech tree of ideas.
It's basically Civ 5 culture.
Yeah, you're picking your cultural things, and it's got an example of raiders here, which even the guy that's standing there as a raider looks a heck of a lot like a Viking to me. So it'd be very easy to go into a Viking thing because you got pillaging. You can pick whether you want to be raider organized band or you just want to be outlaws. Are you night raiders or day raiders?
Something that could be fun with a design like this is if you do get to make your own civilization, instead of having to pick from pre-made ones, they could have a flag or something like a coat of arms kind of thing, where each time you pick a national spirit, it has its own icon or whatever that gets added to your flag or your crest. So all the other players can see what things you've chosen from your that flag or that crest, and it becomes your icon or your logo for the rest of the game. That could be cool. A cool little thematic flavor thing.
Yeah, they do have a little bit of that because some of the spirits do have what do they call it? It's kind of a reputation. Their examples are Spartan warriors, Swiss banking, Silicon Valley, which that's very modern, and Egyptian pyramids. And their example down here is Khans because they get a little bit of a different kind of tree thing going. So you can start out something completely different and rotate to, I'm going to be the Mongols now. Yeah, that's, what is it? It's an age. That one, the Khans thing is in this age 4. So it's and they're saying that every one of the one spirits you can pick has some sort of an advantage. So you're not just sitting there, hopefully it's not like what we were talking about earlier, where with Humankind, where one particular nation, or in this case, one particular spirit is stronger than the other. Hopefully they're going to end up being balanced.
Yeah, well, ideally you would want that to be the case. It's hard to do, but everyone's going to want the imbalanced choice if you only have one or two.
Most of the comments are saying that the choose your own bonus as the starting situation ruins immersion, but is also a double-edged sword.
Ruins immersion.
If you were trying to role play
that's a fully general argument. To me,
I was generalizing the whole argument so I could describe it in one word.
Yeah, to me, the fact that your country gets bonuses regardless of what happens on the game board ruins the immersion.
Yeah,
because there's no causal consistency in your world. And history very much had causal consistency.
Yeah, that's what Boris Goodenough is a comment over on Civ Fanatics there. He's saying that one of the problems with the 4X games is that any peculiarities related to the game's climate, the terrain, or where it is, or the influences of neighbors are meaningless because the game you're playing doesn't take. You can get Spain and get dropped into, like we were joking earlier about North Pole. The game doesn't take that into account. But if you pick Spain flavor and you're in Millennia and you end up in that North Pole area, well, you could pick stuff to help you in that thing to go through those first ages, and it would reflect how a civilization would actually develop if it was in a different climate or a different terrain,
Yeah, and the
and
Spanish
what
very
neighbors.
reasonably would not be incapable of adapting if they had to live
Yeah.
somewhere else.
Well, and of course, again, going back to Humankind, the way that Humankind tries to address that problem is you pick what culture you play as you play the game. So you go into a new era, you pick a new culture. So you can pick a culture that fits well with your current gameplay circumstances.
Yeah.
So you don't pick and commit to that before the game even starts and then are stuck with it regardless of map configuration. You have that, as we've talked about before, there's that Paleolithic era at the start of the game where you have your little nomadic tribes people that wander around and explore before you've even built a city. So you get that lay of the land, and then you get to choose which culture you want, based in part on what you want to do personally, but also like how the map is configured, where you are on the map, whether you've already found neighboring civilizations that you might have to protect yourself with, or which you want to conquer. So you have those choices, and of course they also have the thing where the players pick, the first person to go to a new era picks the culture they want, and then that culture is not available to the other players unless you play the new mode that they're patching in. So you could eventually end up with not very good choices, but that's a result of your actions. You waited, to pick a new culture. You waited to advance to the new era. And so now this is the consequence of that, is maybe you get stuck with a suboptimal or less ideal culture that doesn't fit as well into the current game circumstances. Whereas I'm looking at the screenshots here for Millennia, and it looks like when you start a new game, like before even seeing the map, you have to pick what bonus you want at the start. But like, again, without knowing what the map looks like, I mean, it's kind of just like whatever, it's kind of arbitrary what you choose.
Okay, well, we're done with that aspect.
Next dev diary?
Yeah. Now they have economy part 2 is that the way it's titled. I think this is just the dev diary about the economy, though. No, there we go. They were talking about goods and resources previously. Did we cover this?
We did not, because that was before we came back.
Okay.
I only picked.
I don't know. I mean, this one is mostly covering like your city building. This dev diary, and there's a lot to look at when it comes to this. The city screen in particular is pretty noisy if you just look at it without any context. Typical Paradox games where you're putting your workers and what you're building or whatever. You've like locked slots and.
Oh, this is like me looking at a city in EU4, and you have all these different things that lead into different things to build.
Yeah.
This is much more complicated than EU4. Because in
EU4,
although,
I mean, like you can see similar ideas, structures, like in terms of like building slots in a province in EU4 versus this. But yeah, this is more granular, of course, because there's like thousands of provinces in EU4, and you're not going to have thousands of cities in Millennia. Your computers are not that good, and they will not be that good in the foreseeable future.
Hopefully not.
I mean, I would love for computers to be that good. I would not love for them to try to put
I meant
thousands of cities into the current.
Hopefully, we don't have thousands
level.
of cities. Even with a computer that's good enough to run that it's going to be a nightmare to manage. Unless you
would need some UI help or something. Tool. But by then, we could probably ask an AI to manage a lot of it for us and actually have that be functional.
Yeah, you would have to have AI governors that like actually know what the heck they're doing in order to run something like.
Oh, that's probably easier than making a computer that can run that many cities. Like if you had such a good computer that could do that, you could probably run machine learning AI to train the AIs to govern the cities. Because you'd have to have a ton of computing power in the first place.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that, like, historically, like Civ in particular, when you would automate like city builds and stuff like that, it doesn't exactly make the best decision.
It's not great. That said, you could win fairly high level Civ 4 games just using the governor and like changing whether it's focusing on food or production or whatever, or commerce. It was kind of jank, but like aside, I mean, you could even kind of do it with specialists, but it was pretty bad. Yeah, like I was able to like blitz through an Immortal game like without micromanaging any citizens, so it wasn't great, but for the time, it was like as good as you could reasonably ask. So you could do something like that, but not with 1,000 cities because the machine just couldn't run it.
The number of matrices that have to be multiplied.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't have a firm grasp of the sheer scale of why that's unworkable, but just observing how the games tend to drag on much smaller scales than that with existing games. Like, I don't know exactly what breaks it the hardest, but probably quite a few things break it pretty hard when you try to scale up that much.
Depends on whether it scales by n or n factorial or n squared or nx.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah,
the
well,
number
n
of
factorial
operations required
Bros, crazy fast.
do the number of number of multiplications that are needed to run the game increase by additive or multiplicative factors? Also a major thing.
Yeah.
Every city probably adds I haven't been in programming school for a long time, so I don't know the specifics, but the larger the number of cities, I think probably the exponentially more operations need to be done to keep things in check.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what like mechanics you implement too. Like if you have like a Civ 4 style trade system where cities compute like what their most valuable available city to trade with, cities plural to trade with are, and then like assigns them accordingly and updates that each turn. Like if you're doing something like that and then trying to drop like 1,000 cities for multiple people onto a map, I can't imagine
It's a matrix
the pain
multiplication.
that just that by itself would cause.
Yeah, it's a matrix multiplication problem that is growing in two dimensions with every city built.
Yeah, and that would be absurd. But you don't like have to make a trade system like that. You could just like have this nation has X cities, this nation has Y cities. Let's look at the resources and calculate something, and then you could scale that up much more easily when it comes to trade anyway.
Or
So
you could be
it
like
depends
Civ
what
5
you do with
vanilla.
it.
Or you could be like Civ 5 vanilla and just not have a trade system at all.
Yeah, and that would bypass the trade issue at least. Although Civ 5 would still be like calculating happiness based on 1,000 cities, which would be amusing. But
It would be calculating a lot of things.
yeah, but I mean, like you in principle, you could have 1,000 cities if the cities aren't tethered to anything other than like what they each individually are doing. Then it would just be UI hell rather than computationally expensive. You probably could handle it then. It wouldn't be a good game, but you could do it.
Yeah, you probably could. So let's look at this dev diary we've got. What do we got here?
They deal with those building slots. So they also do have import and export trade. So yeah, this is not something you'd want to scale up.
No. There's
Which
already
surprises
at
me
least
not at all with Paradox.
There's already at least 32 building options in this screenshot of the build menu, and that's not including units. This is all buildings.
Although
Yeah,
that
this is
looks
just
like
a
it
building
depends on
tab.
it depends on the location because not all these screenshots have every slot available. And that would also be consistent with their other game. The more fertile, nice places to own have more slots available than like Siberia. And that
Yeah.
makes sense. Like that's just how most games will implement things like this. Like more attractive sites have more slots available to work with.
By building a container yard in your capital region, you get 3 domestic export slots, which will send you 3 goods from the region with the container yard to any region in your... So those are domestic exports.
Yeah, you have domestic trade as well. And apparently a lot more granular than Civ implementations of domestic trade, where you just build a trader and like send it to a city. Merchants.
You build them using mana.
Yeah, domain power. Like I'm always cautious with the word mana because of the way it gets used. But yeah, like when you have a fully general resource pool or something relatively close to a fully general resource pool that like gets applied to multiple different things that are otherwise not related, that's when it becomes mana. Because our listeners might not be familiar with like the original criticism levied against Paradox games when they started calling resources mana. Part of the reason it was done is because the lead dev of EU4 heated the term mana for stuff going on in EU4. But you have a pool of resources that applies to like your naval research, and also gets reduced by the number of nations you're allied with if you go over your alliance cap. And like reasonably, those are not the same thing. Like building boats should not inform your diplomacy, like in terms of like how many nations you can ally, or like allying extra nations should not reduce your ability to do naval research. But in the game it did. So that's why they started calling it mana, is because like these weren't tied to any like sensible relationships of resources in the game. And that's also true with like the sword mana or the military side, right? Like you can tech up, but if you use your cannons to shoot at that fort, you are going to research technology more slowly in the military category. Like, what is that? That's ridiculous.
Whereas realistically, you would think that actually using those cannons in the field would improve your military research because you're getting practical knowledge of what works and what doesn't, and would be, learning more about how to better conduct warfare with cannons, or more generally with projectiles, than if it was all just a bunch of generals sitting around in an academy, playing war games with one another. And
there's also the caveat that you spend mana to develop provinces. In the original implementation of the game, you did that. Mana was tied to making buildings. Like you had to spend gold and mana to make buildings, but that would slow down your research. And now you straight up use that pool of resources to develop provinces and make them more valuable. However, making your provinces more valuable will slow down your technology. And again, that's an eyebrow-raising trade-off if you want to go with like anything tethered to real-world causal interactions. So this is strictly like a resource constraint system, and that's why it gets called mana. And that's why we're calling some things like this mana in terms of this. Like if you have mutually exclusive options based on a resource pool, and those options don't make sense to be related, then it's mana. Sorry for the tangent for our listeners, but
it was an important one.
Yeah, a crash course on what we mean when we say mana. And that has extended to other games, because it's not like Paradox games are the only ones who do this. Like if you're making a game mechanic and you want to constrain player actions, and you want to like this can happen in any game with constrained resources if it's not handled carefully. And you can even make a case, depending on how simple you want the game to be, that it's not necessarily bad per se. Like you can make interesting trade-offs that don't make real world sense and have it be a good game mechanic, because they're still interesting trade-offs you're making, and that will influence player choices in a way that actually benefits the game somehow. So it doesn't have to be realistic, and mana doesn't have to be bad. But when it does this, it's still mana. And yeah, apparently you can use your merchants to make money, or you can use your merchants to create vassals.
Diplomats also do the same thing.
Yeah. Well, that I'm a little more used to as an EU4 player. Merchants resulting in vassals sounds like dark magic to me as an EU4 player. But it is a different game after all.
Yeah. We have now spent over an hour talking about two games that are not Civilization on a Civilization podcast.
Oh yeah, well we're kind of waiting for the next Civ news thing.
Could they make a new Civ game? Because they wouldn't have tons to talk about.
Oh, I know what we could talk about 2 weeks from now is Dominion 6 strategy. Let's go.
Oh dear.
I'm starting to learn the Dominion 6. I'm even in a multiplayer game for it. So
already?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, one of the groups that I played with when I was a true newbie in Dominions 5 fired up a game for Dominion 6, and they asked if I wanted to play. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll give it a go. So yeah, like none of us are. I mean, literally nobody is like meta strong in Dominion 6 yet. That's not how it works. They've changed enough where like some things from Dominion's 5 skills still translate, but it is a different game. It looks similar, but it is not the same in terms of trade-offs you're making or like timings or anything like that.
Nope. But I have.
That said, like I'm relative to the people I'm playing with, I'm way more experienced this time. Because like the people I'm playing with actually had a few games under their belt when I played my first game with them. But
oh yeah,
not this time. This time I come from a background of having played with some pretty strong players in Dominion 5. Like people have made the finals in Lucid's tournament. I've played against them. I've had good showings against people who are just slightly worse than that. I've even won a few games here and there against reasonably strong competition. So coming into Dominion 6, I'm not like an elite player, but I'm also pretty solid. So we'll see how it goes.
We'll expect a report on that next week, maybe?
Well, there won't be much going on in a multiplayer game. These things these take ages. Usually it's a couple months to finish a game. So I won't have anything new to say there. But if we are dry on topics, we can cover it. That is a turn-based strategy game we could talk about.
Yep. We are out of time for today, so thank you everyone for listening to PolyCast 429. I am CanusAlbinus, and I am joined with our full group today. We've got Makahlua.
And now back to doing tech things with phones and stuff, yay.
TheMeInTeam.
Only scripting the finest tactics.
And MegaBearsFan.
Once again, I really hope that all of these new turn-based historic strategy games do not come out at the same time, because I really don't want to have Civ 7 and Ara and Humankind and Millennia all coming out this fall or whatever, and then having to pick which ones I'm going to be able to play.
I mean, Civ 7 is the obvious one.
It's easy. Join in Dominions. It'll be fun.
Man, I wonder if that spackle on my wall is dry yet.
No.
Come on. It's only the equivalent of a 3-credit hour college course, and then you can be a good player.
Oh, dear.
And by tactics, filming shenanigans.
Oh, I mean, that's a big part of what it means to be good in Dominions.
I feel like shenanigans and tactics are just two sides of the same coin.
The amount of bullcrap that happens between high-level players is part of what makes it so great.
Civilization 3, 4, 5, Beyond Earth, sound clips, copy... Oops. I did it wrong! Everybody laugh at me. Civilization 3, 4, 5, Beyond Earth, and 6, sound clips, copyright Take-Two Interactive. Copyright the PolyCast at thepolycast.net. We did it!
Whee!